Hello, welcome to Lost and Found No More Secrets with DNA Angels. If you're new to the world of DNA Angels, we are a search angel nonprofit organization on a mission to bring closure and connection to individuals seeking to identify their biological parents via their ancestry DNA results. Whether they are an NPE, meaning not parent expected, or non paternal event, donor conceived, adopted, or they just never knew who their biological parent is. Our goal is to provide guidance and support every step of the way. Join us as we embark on journeys of discovery, compassion, and the profound importance of knowing one's roots. Hello, I'm Heidi, team lead genetic genealogist. Thrilled to have my incredible co-host Laura joining me today. Laura's not just any co-host, she's founder and the powerhouse executive director of DNA Angels, diving into DNA mysteries with as much gusto as I do. Hey, Laura, how is it going today?
Hey, Heidi, I'm excited to be back, and I'm also excited to welcome our next guest.
Me too.
I'll tell you more about him in just a minute, but just wait. He is awesome.
And I haven't heard his story. This is a new one for me, so I'm really excited to hear that. One topic I'd like to touch on before we dive into his story, we want to talk about the amount of people that have some sort of DNA surprise after taking a DNA test. As an organization, we began tracking those numbers. Laura, would you like to expand on that?
Yes, thank you for the opportunity to talk about it. So, I hear all the time 5% of people who take a DNA test come back with a DNA surprise that their parent isn't their parent. And now it's recently moved to about 10%. And I have said all along that is just not the right number. It is so many more than that. But this is not a number that we can actually track, right? It's not like it's a reportable offense. You're not calling Ancestry and saying, hey, I found out my dad's not my dad. Write that down somewhere and start tracking it. So I came up with a way to use the kits that we already work with every day to figure out what the average statistic is for someone having a event in their tree at the next generational level, right? So what we're doing is, say a client comes to us and they're adopted. When we identify their mother or their father, sometimes they're also an NPE. Sometimes they also were not raised by their biological dad and something happened outside the marriage. So we're tracking that number, and we have come up with the statistic currently. So we've solved about 550 cases this year. 333 of them we've been able to actually track and get a statistic out of. And so far, out of 333 cases solved, we've solved more than that, just so you know, but these are the ones that we can get a reportable identification from. Out of 333 cases solved, 16.7% of those cases also have a parent that is an NPE. So we're looking at both mom and dad, and it's 16.7%. And I expect it to go up, not much more. I've always said it's between 17 to 20%. So I'm right on the money with what I've been thinking all along after evaluating so many kids for the last 5 years. I'm like, this happens way too often. I've been thinking about 20%. So 20 people out of 100. Yes, 20 people out of 100 on average, if you took a DNA test.
You've been saying for years that
so
5
hopefully,
to 10% is too low.
Yes. So hopefully by the end of the year, we are going to write a peer-reviewed white paper where we can get that in a science journal so that we can have documented evidence of that number being higher, and so that the community is more comfortable repeating that number. And that's all I have to say on that. Yeah.
Okay, well, before we get started on Bruce's story, I want to remind everybody to stay tuned to the end of the show. As always, we're going to give away a really cool prize. So we'll be doing that the last few minutes of the show. So I'm going to introduce Bruce's story before we see his beautiful face. So here's a little bit of introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, prepare to have your minds blown. Welcome back to Lost and Found No More Secrets, where the truth always comes out no matter how shocking. Today we have a guest who stumbled upon a DNA bombshell that rocked his entire world. Bruce Paul Scott was raised in a loving home and what he thought was the average family. Bruce's journey of self-discovery took a jaw-dropping turn when he dared to unlock the unveiling when he dared to unlock the secrets hidden within his genes by taking an ancestry DNA test. Can I just start that over? I'm going to start that over.
Let's start over.
Yeah, because I stumbled. Ladies and gentlemen, prepare to have your minds blown. Welcome back to Lost and Found No More Secrets, where the truth always comes out no matter how shocking. Today we have a guest who stumbled upon a DNA bombshell that rocked his entire world. Bruce Paul Scott was raised in a loving home and what he thought was the average family. Bruce's journey of self-discovery took a jaw-dropping turn when he dared to unlock the secrets hidden within his genes by taking an ancestry DNA test. Brace yourself as we delve into the unbelievable story of Bruce's DNA revelation, unveiling a hidden lineage that turned his life upside down and left him questioning everything that he knew. Laura, you were Bruce's angel. Before we introduce him, can you tell us what makes his story so incredibly special?
Well, let me just tell you. So Bruce and I have become very good friends over the years, but Bruce was actually the very first case that I was assigned as an angel for the original Facebook group that I volunteered for. So Bruce was my very first client ever. And it took me 3 years to solve his case. It was so hard, so many roadblocks everywhere we turned. And I think at the end of his journey, by the time I identified his dad, he had 12,000 people in his tree. Yet we still can't connect 11,000 of those people.
Wow.
to who his direct ancestors are. It's just been one crazy twist after the other, but we do have verified identify of his birth father. And I can tell you that the day that I was able to call Bruce and tell him that I knew for a fact who his dad was a day I'll just never forget. I was literally in tears telling him who his dad was. So yeah, I became very close to this.
Let's bring Bruce on. Hello, Bruce. Welcome.
Good morning. Good morning. Very much. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you. How are you feeling today?
Feel wonderful. Wonderful. The sun's coming out here in Washington, Washington State, and it's going to be a nice day for the next few days. Spring is here, so it's great.
Great. Well, tell us a little bit about your family growing up and what it was like for you as a child.
Certainly. I was raised in the Midwest, Oklahoma and Kansas and Texas. I was born in Texas, Dallas, Texas. I was one of 10 children that my parents had. I'm the fourth of 10, kind of right in the middle area of my parents' marriage and their all their childbirths. And essentially the thing that stood out mostly was that I just looked different than my siblings. I had curly hair, dark curly hair. We lived in Texas in the sunny areas, and I would brown up pretty well during the summer with the tan. You know, we ran around barefoot and shirtless most of the time. And of course, that always gathered remarks from people, questions and comments and things like that. I think I thought a lot of it. It was always on my mind about something about it, but I had nowhere to go because my parents always told me that they were my parents. I am your father. My dad would tell me. So I just moved along with the comfort of a family accepting me like that. But boy, it was, frankly, it was tough, weird, whatever you might want to call it, growing up looking biracial in a white family, in a white community. And I say right now as an adult, boy, was my face red when I would tell anybody who asked, no, I'm just a white guy with curly brown hair. And people were, yeah, type of a thing. So that, and I don't have hair now, I shave it, but people look at old photographs of me and ask the same question. So I have an answer now. So it was, but I was very loved, very accepted. And as we'll discuss, my family and even the cousins that I found on the East Coast that I've always known, none of them have rejected me or my story. They've embraced me like they always have. So in that regard, I'm very lucky.
So what made you decide to take an ancestry DNA test?
Essentially, I was watching that show, Who Do You Think We Are? And Ashley Judd was the celebrity they were discussing.
I've seen that episode.
And, yeah, she was describing places in Massachusetts where some of her family was from, and she mentioned some names that kind of sounded familiar to me. And I remarked to my wife that, hey, maybe I'm related to Ashley Judd. I don't think I am, but I saw the 800 number and had a credit card and spent $100 on a test. However, mine was always an investigative tool. When I sit in that tube, I thought I'm looking to see if there's going to be an ethnicity that I've missed or somewhere that I don't know. And I'm going to follow this to the very end, no matter what it takes. So that was really the motivation, was to use it as a tool to see if I had any African-American heritage anywhere along my line.
So you had your suspicions, but no one had ever told you anything other than this is your father.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's essentially correct.
So tell me that moment. You get an email and it says, congratulations, your ancestry results are in. And you went to go click on that. Tell me about that.
I was in California in 2014. And when I saw those results, there's just a little bit of the brain ticking away. And I thought, well, how does this pan out? But I basically just slid back in my chair and took a big sigh and said, well, just like I'm doing now. Okay, this gives me one lead to follow. Apparently I have African-American centimorgans, or whatever my term might be. But that simply led me into immediately thinking, I've got to rule out some other possibilities. And I'd always thought I'd been switched at a hospital, for example. So I paid for a test with my elder sister and on Ancestry, and she came back as a half sister, so to speak, but she had 0 sub-Saharan African genomes. Mm-hmm. And then I had another test to see, well, I wonder if I had the same father as my younger brother. And I took a test with him, and it just comes back, it's an XY chromosome test, and he and I did not have the same father. And then finally I took one more with the elder sister, a mitochondrial one, because I wanted to make sure that I was the son of my mother. And that comes back as a percentage of possibilities, and it was 99.9. So I accepted that we all had the same mother, but I'm the only one with a different father, and he was African American.
Now, your parents are alive during this time whenever you get back?
No, they both deceased in 2000 and 1999. And never told me, didn't leave anything for me, didn't leave. I've asked the last surviving cousins that I have, any friends that we might have, and they took that secret tight-lipped in the vault to the grave.
Yeah. Right.
So
what is your next step? You figured out that your ethnicity is different than what you originally thought. And then you probably went over to the DNA matches, correct? And there was a lot on the DNA matches that you didn't recognize.
Oh, absolutely. The only one that I found, her name was Connie, and she was about a second or third cousin of mine. She had been doing her own genealogical studies, but was very stingy or reluctant to share any of her trees or information like that. And maybe she didn't know either, but she just wasn't doing sharing anything. Mm-hmm. But I immediately, or rather soon, flew to Arlington, Texas to meet her in a public place, and she was with a friend, and it was all very up and up. So at least I had someone that I was related to, but I had no closer steps to identifying who my birth father was. So it's just back to looking around. And
how did you connect with Laura?
Well, by that time, I was in 2017, I believe, when Catherine St. Clair started her first NPE group, or at least the first one that I had been exposed to. I was kind of sleeping a little bit later, and Good Morning America came on, and she was on TV and discussing this kind of a thing. And I took down the information. I joined their group, was accepted. They had a few angel searches. I was just early on in the process of finding out who could help me. And then that's how I met Laura. And Laura, at about the same time, was going in another direction, either with or without the NPE group of Catherine, which was fine. Mm-hmm. And she took it from there.
Laura, how difficult was this case?
Well, yeah, like I said at the beginning, it was horrific, actually. And I have to say, I was a brand new angel. Like, he was my first client. I had solved my own case, and I helped a couple of cousins solve theirs. Mm-hmm. And when the opportunity came in that group to have like angels help other, other members, I was interviewed. I told them about my experience and what I'd like to do with that experience. And so they said, yeah, you can be one of our angels. So literally, he was my first assigned case. I solved actually over 1,000 cases before I actually finally solved Bruce's. But I cut my teeth as an angel on Bruce's case. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't say I ever made any mistakes with his case. I just couldn't solve it. It was that complicated. Like, all of his matches, many of them knew their family tree, but they could only get their tree back so far. And then so many of them did not know who their father was. And unfortunately, Bruce matched on that unknown father's side, not the mother's side. So everybody was at a loss. It was tough, but I can tell you who the slave owners were for Bruce's ancestors. I can give you all of that, all the way down to Bruce's, great grandfather. But I just couldn't tell you who his dad was because of all of the outside relationships that didn't come together in a marriage. And that's what's required many times to solve a case, is to triangulate that DNA number or genetic distance of that match with a marriage that goes together with common ancestors. And when you don't have that, then you just have to piece it together and start target testing lines to see where your highest value comes back at. So yeah, it was quite complicated. But I do also have to say that Bruce is right. So I met him through the other group, and we kind of left and began DNA Angels. When I first met him, we were called Stevens Angels, and he did our logo for us for that little group. And then when we became DNA Angels, for DNA Angels as well, it's actually morphed several times over the years, but Bruce has been the person that did all of that for us originally. So thank you for all of that, Bruce. He just never gave up. Honestly, Bruce was so tenacious about it. He wasn't upset that it was taking so long. Obviously, he wanted answers, but he was never upset about it. He had grace every single time I talked to him about it. He did not show a lot of frustration. He was passionate, but not in an angry way. So that I really appreciated. And we had multiple angels. It wasn't just me. We have multiple angels over the years, like give me a second set of eyes to see, am I missing something here? What is it that I have blindfolds on? But they're like, no, this can't be solved right now. You need a different match. And I'll go ahead and fast forward to that moment. We finally had a match to a half great niece, and she didn't know who her dad was. And that's what was going to get me to my answer. So what I said was, if you let me solve your case, solving your case will absolutely let me solve Bruce's case. So I talked her into sharing her DNA with me, and I solved her case. And her case wasn't actually that difficult. But what I noticed with her case was, in order to get to Bruce's answer, her grandmother married Bruce's father. He was a match to her grandma's husband's line, and not to her grandma, but she matched both lines. And so that was the aha moment. I'm like, he doesn't match grandma, but he matches grandma's husband. That is his dad, just based on the relationship track. And I'll stop there, but that's how I solved it eventually. I had a great niece. I think it was a 300 centimorgan match, but she was the one and only one match that would lead me to the correct answer, because nobody else had this man in their tree.
So tell me, Bruce, when Laura called you and said, got it, what was that like for you?
Well, first off, she was correct about solving my grandniece's case first. She had contacted me thinking that I was related, not as a father, but closer brother, something like that. And thank you for reminding about that as well. But when Laura called me, it was January 27th of 21, and I was painting my bathroom. So I was up on the step ladder, and it came across Laura was calling, and she said, well, I found your father. And I climbed off the step ladder and listened to her. And, very frankly, I broke down in tears. It was when it wasn't sadness, it wasn't joy. It wasn't like winning the lotto or, missing a bad accident or something like that, where you just kind of carrying those emotions for a long time, and then suddenly, wow, this has been solved. And also out of gratitude of her efforts. And yes, I would be described as a tenacious person. I'm not unemotional, but sometimes when you're going through these things, you can't be distracted by bad emotion or someone who becomes emotional in giving you information. Having a steady, objective mind in any kind of investigation is important. And I think I'm just that way naturally. There's still a lot of questions that I have, but certainly not about the genetic part of it. So it was an emotional day in many, many ways. And once I quit crying, it was just kind of a relief, and then started to, check against other matches. And the woman that Laura described is about 2 matches right below me. So, and I can see of other family members that I have. But it was because in the African-American community, especially during that time of the 50s and 40s, and during those times, I think African Americans of that time frame are very reluctant to discuss family matters with young people. They talk about this is old people's talk, and they'd have to leave the room, or they were obscured in some way. And frankly, in many of those communities, marriage or outside children are prevalent, and not just necessarily African American, but they tend to take the name of a mother rather than the father. So sometimes that can throw somebody off. You know, one name can be from multiple generations, before. So there's some hacking through those kinds of things. And to this very moment, and I wouldn't ask Laura how she did it, but she's very tenacious too, and having all the records and civic files and files that you have to have, subscriptions for with census and those kind of things really helps. And that's where these donations go to help pay for those kinds of things. And by the way, I was more than wonderfully surprised and grateful to be able to work on your graphical kinds of things. And I'm rewarded every time I see something in print that it's been an enduring brand for you, that we did it right the first time. And it's always tough to do it so that you don't meet personally, but we were lucky in that way. So I was grateful to do it.
Have you been able to get reconnected with any of your biological family members?
Oh, well, yes, I have. Right at the time that I found all this information, I found that I had this grand niece. I already knew about her. Mm-hmm. And I'd gotten some names from some people that have a similar last name, but they're third, fourth, and fifth cousins. So they wouldn't know anything about my particular circumstance, so that was fine. But I found and when I say half, I'll just say it was a niece and a nephew that I went to see. And the niece is she's reasonably supportive. I'm in contact with her. But the nephew won't have anything to do with me. He doesn't believe in the technology. He's suspicious of it. And I think he has more to be able to tell me about my birth father. My half brother is deceased. I don't have any of them to contact. But the very best thing that came out of it was I got a call or an email from a woman who thought I was the third cousin or something. And so she was wondering how we might be related. And I just emailed her back. I said, well, it looks like we are, but we probably need to talk with each other. So would you please call me? So we connected by phone. And Laura would attest to this, or any of you, of course, that, sometimes you give somebody some information that just blows them away. Yeah. So she kept talking about being my cousin. I said, no, your centimorgans don't reflect that. And she didn't know what a centimorgan was or percentages, but I just had to say, no, you're my sister. And of course, there was silence on the end of the phone. Are you there? Pick up the phone. She had no idea, absolutely no idea. She couldn't put, she's 8 years younger than I am, couldn't understand where we might have crossed paths. Of course, I've met her since then. But she was blown away. She had no idea. In my particular case, my mother is white. Mm-hmm. In her case, her mother is African American, and she looks very much like her other siblings I've just seen photographs of, but she never had that suspicion that I did. She was in a black family, and that was it for her. So once I convinced her and gave her a little bit of information about percentages and centimorgans, she understood, and we talked almost several times a week, for long periods of time, kind of working through this. In March of that year, I went to visit her in California where she lives. And then also in another year, my wife and I drove to her home and met her as well. Her name is Carmen. She's just a wonderful, sweet woman, very close to her father. I don't know if her father knew of the difference, you know, in having a different father. On my particular case, I'm sure my dad must have known, but, you know, because I look so much different. But with her, there wasn't that distinction growing up. So, but she's been a wonderful sister. She's taught me a lot about the ethnicity side of my identity that I absolutely do not have. It's like growing up without an immune system. You know, it's not embedded inside me as far as any kind of African-American culture.
Have you tried to embrace that culture at all? Like understand it, or, you know, embrace the the food, the, you know, just the shift in the...
No. The answer simply is no, not because I have wanted to or haven't wanted to, but
have you or someone you know had an unexpected discovery after taking an at-home DNA test? Perhaps you are adopted or a donor-conceived person? DNA Angels is founded on the principle that it is a fundamental human right to know who our biological parents are. Our mission is to promote family connections by providing support, guidance, and expertise to individuals facing the complexities of non-paternal events, donor conception, or adoption. DNA Angels, finding families one DNA strand at a time.
I have to say, for the sake of this interview and the sake of anybody who's listening to this, it is one of the most disruptive things to not have an identity or to decide which one you're going to choose that day. I was telling my wife the other day that if I was in prison for multiple crimes, which gang am I going to join? Is there a white gang? Is there a black gang? How about all the, and I said, half-breed gangs, you know, people that are mixed, whether it's black and white or Hispanic, whatever it may be. I kind of think it's disingenuous if I suddenly, what do they call, not identity theft, but cultural assimilation. There's another word for it, I was thinking. To just suddenly pick and choose whichever culture I want to be in. Because I denied one culture for so long, and okay, I accept the white culture, but I'm almost 72 years old. And so when I'm around the very few black people that live around here, they're not my age. And if they are, we're just guys. I'm a veteran, so I meet a lot of veteran black soldiers, and we're just guys. Racial identity doesn't really come into it at this time. But when I was younger, frankly, I lived in the South and didn't grow up with a particularly endearing acceptance or attitude about black people. I mean, it was everywhere. I was raised in that kind of a white, and my parents weren't racist in any way, but and they never used derogatory terms, but through my school and other activities outside the home, it was blacks or whites or Hispanics, and you just kind of pick your place where you're going to be. So I never really understood that until I got into the service and was really around black people from all over the United States and the world. So, but no, it's difficult.
What did your half siblings say when you got back your results and you were a half sibling to them, and you also had African-American ethnicity in you? What was their reaction to that?
I would just say one of love, curiosity. They wanted to know more. Really not so much of like, how did that happen? You know, or how did you come along? You know, what happened with mom and dad during that time? But more it was, what's the process you're going through? You know, what's this DNA testing like? It was really more the process of that, and once I explained, you know, you spit in a tube, you get your results back, and you go from there. But they've never had any kind of disparaging things to say about my parents. It's probably just as much of a mystery to them, but across the whole board, it's been nothing but acceptance. And the sister that I did the initial test with to see if she was African American, when she was dying in the hospital, I went back to Oklahoma and was with her when she passed away. And the last thing that she said to me while she was still conscious was that I was her brother, her full brother. And that was pretty important. She had no resistance or any kind of hesitation of me as a brother. She and I were very close and always have been. And her loss was very dear to me, very early, and could have been avoided. But I certainly had felt the love and acceptance that she had up for me. And all my siblings have been like that as well.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Do you have any advice for anybody that it would be not just from an NPE perspective, but for somebody that was in your same situation where they had suspicions that they may have a different ethnicity, but they're scared to take that next step into getting tested? Do you have any advice for anybody in that position?
Oh, sure, sure. Well, the first piece of advice is that if you're scared, at least you've identified one of your points of resistance of taking it. So it's just like, you know, I think I have cancer, but I'm afraid to take a test to see what kind it is. But, you know, my leg's fallen off or something. So, and now with the prevalence of DNA testing, I would suggest that someone talk with a family friend, a trusted friend, suggest what they want to do, and whether they take Ancestry or 23andMe or any of the other myriad of tests out there, it's a sense of willpower. Either you're going to do it or you're not going to do it. And you can dance around it all day long, but in my particular case, because I had suspicions, I wanted to use this as a tool, a scientific tool that I believed in, and it's shown true 100%. The advice I would have for somebody who is just using it to see if how French they are, or Irish, or in my sister's case, to see if she was Somalian, and then they come up with a surprise that they have some of these DNA groups already bookmarked, because they're going to want to go to them once they find out. Because if they get support from their family or no support, at least in these DNA support groups, there's qualified assistance, either through professionals like you, or I kind of consider myself a professional counselor in this, because I've been through this and has told my story. And it helps to have somebody go along with them to bounce things off. But my first part of advice is just recognize your fear. You know, take a sip of water, take a deep breath, spit in the tube and send it off, and make sure you fasten your seatbelt.
Right.
And
there is support out there, even if it's like you said, if it's not your immediate family. You'd be surprised at what a community this is growing with all the people that are taking a DNA test, and our community is getting. It's not a community that necessarily want to sign up for, but we are here if you need us.
Yeah. And the second piece that I might mention is that throughout all of this, I've been a pretty staunch advocate for men, for the participation and the inclusion of men in this process. And whatever the stark number of that 16% that Laura was describing earlier, without going into any other kind of genetic distinctions. Essentially, we're male or female. So on any particular scattering of information, half of NPEs are men, half are women, you know, or a little bit either way. But for a lot of reasons, men don't participate either verbally or either, you know, literally, like by writing in some way, and they don't speak much about it. Mm-hmm. And I'm a bit curious about that, because maybe we've been culturally molded to not show our feelings, or maybe that's not important to us. But I can tell you, it was important to me. And for any man who says it's not important, I would love to have that conversation with them. So men should speak on this subject as well, how they're feeling, for sure.
For sure.
Well, I think that a large percentage of men don't even test either. And I think the big fear for them is, and it kind of goes to show who they are as a person, is they're afraid that they're going to have like a new child show up, you know? So I think it all systemically kind of comes in a big circle there as well. But you're right. I would have to say that 90% of the people that apply for help at DNA Angels are women. And if it is a case for a male, his wife's normally representing him. And we're like, I want to talk to the client. You know, I appreciate your help, wifey, but I want to talk to the client. I need to know that he feels that his answer is just as important as I think his answer is. So I can't care more about your solution than you do. I say that all the time. I'm with you there. And a lot of times the men, they really don't talk, and you are a very good advocate for the male voice and all the support groups. I see you out there all the time making comments. So good job there.
Yeah, I think it's important. And in my particular case, my wife and I discussed that same thing. You know, gee, what if I had a child that suddenly knocked on the door? On a personal note, my wife had a previous marriage, and I had 2 stepkids. I was married at 47. I had dated a few times. And she basically just kind of said, well, if that happens, we just have to deal with it, you know, when it comes to that point. I don't think I have any children. I had a child in high school that didn't survive, but I had no fear of somebody coming after me in that particular way. So I was okay with it.
Know that you would embrace that child. If that did happen, we know after all that you've been through, you would definitely embrace that child.
I would certainly hope so, and think that I would want to. And it's curious that that's one of the things that my newfound niece told me about. It was her grandfather would be my father. She said, "Oh, he would have accepted you, and had he known about you." And gee, I don't know if he did know about me or not, but I don't think he would have been capable of embracing me because of the racial environment in East Texas in the early 50s. I don't think you see a black man coming around to my white household to see his son. And
I just wanted to add that we never figured out what the conception point was. We don't know because he's considerably older than your mom.
Oh yeah.
Your biological dad, because we looked at that too, and I'm like, wow, I just didn't expect that. But there is no other person that it can be. There's no other generation it can be. That's just the facts of the case. I mean, it happens. It happens more often than you think. But we never, you know, obviously everybody took this secret to their grave. We don't know if it was consensual. We don't know if it was non-consensual. We don't know if it was, if he worked at somewhere that Bruce's mom worked at, and it was just, you know, a one-time, you know, slip. We don't know. But he's right. You know, back in the 50s, this would not have been something that was accepted you know, by the general public. So I think that I'm going to go on record and say that I think it's important that you always know your truth, and you should have been told your truth at some point. But I think that as your parents, they were probably trying to protect you and them due to, you know, the culture of society at that time. But at some point, you should have been, I'm going to say you should have been told, because we all have a right to know.
Absolutely. And I believe that wholeheartedly. The protecting thing, I can certainly see my parents wanting, you know, to do that. But as a thinking person, and as an investigative, and as a profiler, I have my own suspicions. I have kind of my own narrative about my conception. And I don't hold it in a real positive light. I just say it that way. But I'm surprised, and I'm always eager to discuss this with somebody, not eager, but I'm not reluctant, that oftentimes they will try to fill in the narrative for you. And they say, well, you don't know that it was this, or you know that it wasn't that. And I'd say, well, you're absolutely right. I don't have the smoking gun in front of me here, but here are my thoughts about it, my intuition, you know, these kinds of things. But we only got to that part of the conversation because somebody didn't believe my particular feeling. And another part of that third part of information or advice is that once you find your truth and you find out more about it, at some point you've got to become comfortable in discussing it, because it can come up at any time. I could be out in public, or I can be out with people, and mostly because they see pictures of me and my family, and they say, well, who's this guy?
Right.
And boom, it goes right into that. Or they may indicate that they've got multiple kids from different fathers or what have you.
Right.
So I learned to talk about it in a comfortable way in order to help somebody else who might be reluctant to take a test, or they're having trouble with handling the results of it. And I won't take any kind of disrespect to my parents or any other kind of racial slurs that I've experienced over my life. However, being biracial, I'm surprised at the amount of comments that blacks and whites make about each other, because they didn't think I was white, or they didn't think I was black. So I had kind of a bird's eye view to some people's racial prejudices. And many of them were directed at me when I was a kid, and I just never had any tools to respond to them other than some kind of a offhand remark that my dad would say, well, tell them this when they ask you that, or say
Bruce,
that.
I have a feeling that you're going to have a lot of people make comments on this video wanting to ask you questions. Mm-hmm. Are you comfortable if they ask you questions going over to their page and being able to have a private message with them? Because I have a feeling that
oh yeah,
it's going to really resonate with a lot of people.
Well, I think it will, because, well, first off, I'll discuss anything with anybody who's needing help through this, especially if they're male, old guy like me, and biracial.
Yeah. I
mean, I'm even 0.5% of that 16% that Laura was describing. So yeah, if
we
someone has that.
We appreciate that, and we appreciate you coming on. We love your story. We're already 50 minutes into it. We have a little bit more to talk about, but I want to thank you for being a guest on the show.
It's been my pleasure. It's always a pleasure to support something Laura and the DNA Angels are doing. And I would encourage other people to do so as well, especially if they've had their case solved by one of the angels. They better be on the horn.
We always tell people, buckle your seatbelt.
Yeah, touting the skill of the angels, and bringing them the answers, to each particular person.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think you're one of our number one fans and cheerleaders, and we appreciate it. Your support over the years has meant so much to us. Thank you, Bruce. It's so good seeing you again.
All right. It's a much pleasure. And thank you very much, Laura, and Heidi as well.
Goodbye, Bruce.
Bye-bye.
Bye now. Peace.
Let me just kind of fix our frame here, Heidi. And we'll get to talking about stuff. Just a moment. It's always so good to see Bruce. He is always just so happy and cheerful. He has a very serious, story to talk about, but he's always, glad to share. And this is never not a traumatic event in someone's life, right? Like it will really shake you up, and especially an ethnicity shift. And it's not just at a multiracial thing. It could be a cultural issue too. I can't tell you the amount of clients, and I'm sure that you've worked with them too, who never knew they were Jewish.
That's exactly when I asked him that question about embracing that culture, because I've had so many people find out they're Jewish, and they're like, I didn't even know that would show up on my DNA test. So, what do I do with this information? A lot of them have embraced it.
Yes, it's a big deal, especially a culture like that. When their, community went through so much, strife in World War II and Hitler, and trying to rebuild their community. So they really need every person that they can to stand up and represent for the community. And it's not just that. I mean, many people think that they have Irish in them, or they were Italian, and they come to find out they don't have any of it, and oops, surprise. Maybe dad's my dad, but my mom's father's not her father. And that's, where the shift happened. So yeah, it's kind of a big deal, but it's always so good to have him. But why don't you tell everybody about the contests that we're running?
Okay, so what you can do is like and comment on the show here, and we will randomly pick one of the viewers to be able to go to our website. We have a bunch of really cool books on our website. There's NPE books, there's adoption books. We got Peter Boney's DCP, donor conceived book. You can go on there. It's dnaangels.org. and pick out a book, and we will send it to you. So we will tell you on here on the comment section who is the winner.
Yep. So every week we'll pick a new winner. So every week there's a new winner until the end of the season. So talk shows or podcasts, we all have a season, right? So we'll record a whole bunch of shows, and then we'll take like a month or two off, and then we'll start another season. So till the end of the season here, we're going to do a book a week for anybody who likes and comments. And you don't even have to talk about Bruce's story, although we do hope to see your support of Bruce in the comments. You can just say enter to win, and you will be entered to win. And then before our next show, we will put in the comments who won, and we will notify you that you're a winner. And like Heidi said, we have so many books. And remember, DNA Angels is one word and one A. It's not a two word spelling. It's DNANGELS.org, not a .com. It's a .org. We have a lot of people trying to play with our name right now, so we just want to be very careful about how we say that. So we are ending every show now with an outrageous or funny obituary, and I have got the obituary for today's show. You want to hear it, Heidi?
Yes, I'm excited.
Okay. So David Norman Wynn, a.k.a. Diddlin' Dave, sharp dressed man, midnight rider of DeBerry, Texas, passed away peacefully in his home on July 7, 2023. He was born on August 9, 1948, to Alan Paul Wynn and Edith Irene Strawn. He was the fourth of 9 children. He was equal parts OG, a-hole, great dude, family man, and a crown royal connoisseur. He was, of course, the best truck driver in the world, as most truck drivers think they are. He has been spotted passing Fire Lake, where his brother Joe is, turning off the highway to hell onto the stairway to heaven, where Larry Gunman Pate is waiting at the gates. He will be laid to rest at Mount Zion Cemetery, where he will be fishing on the Golden Lake and tending his bountiful garden while he waits for his current wife, Libby, and his future wife, Stevie Nicks. He encourages everyone to chug-a-lug a tall, cool glass of Libby's sweet iced tea and roll your windows down to feel the breeze while you're living life in the fast lane. He leaves behind a loving wife of 57 years, Libby Kyle Wynn, 2 children, Mary Teresa and David Paul, grandsons, Matthew and wife Crystal, Michael and wife Caitlin, Jonathan and Jesse, great-grandson Maddox, Landon, Beckham, Noah and John, Grayson and Witten, as well as several brothers, sisters, extended family, and friends. Visitation, yada, yada, yada. But catch this. P.S. If anyone still owes him money, James Allen Wynn, call his daughter concerning payments past due and payable immediately. All forms of payment are accepted. Payment plans will be considered. This obituary was provided to us by the family of David Norman Wynn.
I love it. I love it.
Isn't that a good one? I mean,
visual.
I thought he couldn't get better than last week, but this week was the good one too.
That's great.
Okay, thank you. See you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.